Thank you for auditing Professor Skye's Record Review, the always positive new music review show hosted by a French professor right next to his dog who is sunbathing on a nice Sunday afternoon. You can hear him sigh and whisper right now. I'm going to be reviewing the album Down in the Weeds Where the World Once Was by Bright Eyes. And I like to do a thing, on this channel. I am a French professor, I'm not a music expert, and part of the reason I do this channel is that there's a lot of bands that I've heard of, or even that I've heard, but I've never really given a lot of attention to. I've never really invested in any of their art to really know what do I think of them, what are they about. If you watch any of my channel, you'll know there's just tons of bands where I'm like, oh, what are these guys? What is Cage the Elephant? And then I listen to their album and then I review it, okay? So Bright Eyes is an interesting case. First of all, they have always gotten immediate points positive because they're named after a Planet of the Apes reference, which is wonderful. That's great. Also, they're from Omaha, Nebraska, which is great. I once got stopped and profiled by the police in Omaha, Nebraska, because I had out-of-state plates. They asked my friend and I how, they separated us and asked us questions about, how long had we known each other, and I said 2 years, and my friend said 10. The real answer was 6. It was weird. But, I like Omaha. I like music that doesn't come from the coasts. I like music that doesn't come from Brooklyn or from LA. It's interesting to see where it comes from. But the primary negative association that I had with Bright Eyes comes from over a decade ago. So my ex-wife is very into music, and when we were still married, she got really into the band My Morning Jacket. If you've seen the American Dad episode of about My Morning Jacket, that was our life. That is an amazingly accurate depiction of our life during that time. And around that time, the lead singer from My Morning Jacket started a supergroup with Conor Oberst from Bright Eyes called Monsters of Folk. And so, it's great. I like My Morning Jacket. I like Monsters of Folk. And I remember because, I started listening. I was like, we should listen to this. And for some reason, my wife at the time just said, no, I don't like Bright Eyes. So I'm like, screw it. I'm just going to dedicate my time and my space to the music that she does like because, we're listening to music in the house. And so basically 11 years ago, 12 years ago, whenever it was, I just sort of decided that I don't like Bright Eyes either. So when the Phoebe Bridgers album came out and I realized that Conor Oberst was on there, I was like, oh, wait, maybe it's time for me to form my own opinion. It's not my ex-wife's fault that I didn't do my own thinking, right? It's entirely my own fault. And there's kind of a weird, ironic thing here. One of my favorite takes on music from my ex-wife is her admiration of Jeff Tweedy from Wilco. And what she's always said, and I think it's an interesting point, is that if you could sing like anybody, singing like Jeff Tweedy wouldn't be a bad choice. Jeff Tweedy of Wilco, who has this amazing strength and vulnerability at the same time. This kind of world-weary, raspy, yet clear voice. There's an ineffable quality to his voice that is just divine, right? That's part of what makes Wilco such a great band. But as I listened to this entire Bright Eyes album, I 5 songs in, I'm like, who does this remind me of? Who does this singer remind me of? God, there's somebody. He sings with this really kind of vulnerable but strong, kind of raspy, slightly Oh, actually, this is the only singer I've ever heard that makes me feel the same way that Jeff Tweedy does. Although Jeff Tweedy honestly has a sadder tone to his voice. Maybe it's just I know more of his life story, but the struggling with addiction and the tenuous grip on life that I hear in Wilco's music doesn't quite go to Bright Eyes as I hear it. So in this way, this is the way I'm going to frame the video. I do reviews, but I always try to do some kind of framing device. And if I can have some kind of clickbaity title, then all the better. And that's why I've called this video something along the lines of Bright Eyes, are they a lighter Wilco or Wilco light? And that's if I'm being kind or mean. If I'm being unkind to Bright Eyes, I would say that they are like Wilco, but the light version, right? Like Miller Lite, Coors Light. They do what Wilco does, but not quite as well. Or, if I was being kind, I might say that they are a lighter Wilco, meaning that their music is a little bit less heavy. Thematically, spiritually, maybe it's just that feeling that I get from Jeff Tweedy's, the feeling you get that Jeff Tweedy often has a razor on his wrist as he's singing. So maybe like they do similar things, but just in a slightly lighter way. So I'm going to kind of approach this album from that angle. I don't know if this is a comparison that is made often. I've never heard this comparison, but it seems pretty evident to me. And I'll sort of describe what I hear as the first time truly listening to a Bright Eyes album. This is what I hear. I hear very thoughtful rock and roll music, very well constructed, lyrics that are good. They might be great. These lyrics might be great. I can't tell. My initial take is that they're not life-changing. They're a little bit too vague to be as meaningful as I like. But every word is well chosen. There's no kinds of like throwaway lines. And in that way, it's very admirable what the music is. Like every line that you hear is of substance. But that substance is not quite as deep as I'd like it to be. The album seems to be very much haunted by what appears to be a dead brother. I don't know the story of Conor Oberst, but there's a couple references to dead brother. Sorry, I just shaved, so I'm all itchy. There are a couple references to dead brothers on here, a couple references to ex-wives, which is fitting. I don't know if that's true, but that's definitely the feeling I get from the album. And a lot of themes of middle age and I wouldn't say existential dread, maybe existential discomfort. Okay, he makes reference to turning 40 and how difficult that is, and there's a great, probably my favorite lyrics on the album from the song called Tilt-A-Whirl, where this is a good example of the kind of lyrics that he has here. Life is a solitary song, no one to clap or sing along. It sounds so sweet and then it's gone so suddenly. So not quite existential dread, not quite, oh my God, our existence is fleeting, but a lot of that. And in general, it seems that the answer on this album is that the thing to do is just to sort of acknowledge the futility and kind of sing and dance. The production on this record is interesting. It's kind of hard to describe. Like often musicians will have a sort of front load complexity. You know, we'll have a song be very rich and produced, and then things will kind of break down. This album breaks up. Like it doesn't get stripped down as the song goes. It gets stripped up. It puts clothes on. Whatever the opposite of stripped down is, that's what happens. Basically, every song starts with the lead singer and one instrument. Maybe a guitar, maybe a piano, maybe two guitars, maybe a bass and drums in there too. But around like a quarter of the way through, halfway through, more instruments start coming in. We're talking strings, sometimes an orchestra, sometimes a choir, sometimes horns, sometimes a horn solo. One time, a bagpipe. Did I hear a bagpipe? I only listened a couple times. I think I heard a bagpipe in there. And it makes it that each song is a journey. Each song starts minimalist and ends maximalist. And that's the journey of the album. And it's done in a way that isn't too obtrusive. I wouldn't say, very rarely did I ever feel that it was kind of like overproduced. Like they're trying too hard. Maybe it's the fact that it comes in gently. And if you're not paying attention, you know, one of the times I listened to it, I was driving around with my family, and I wasn't paying attention to all this movement that's going underneath. And it's not unique in the history of rock and roll, but as far as an entire album doing this same trick over and over again, it is at least worth a listen and quite interesting. I'm going to play you an example from the album, and then I'm going to go track by track so you get an idea of what it's like. My favorite track on the album is called, I have to read my notes here, 2 Deaths in 3 Parts. Ooh! I don't know what this is about. I'm sure I could read up the lyrics. It doesn't really matter what it's about. This is a good example of the kind of pleasant atmosphere, not pleasant, but a consistent atmosphere, a kind of dark atmosphere throughout the album. And I'm going to play you this really cool part where it's a kind of meditation on middle life, but there's this cool like solo thing that happens, and it's part of this whole build-up where there's like strings and pedal steel and echo effects. I'm just going to play you a little bit of the end of a chorus into one of these nice little instrumental breaks, because all throughout the album there's a lot of attention paid to instrumentation. It seems like each member of the band like sort of has a moment in the album where they get to do something, and this is just a great produced thing with this cool little lead line. I think it's a keyboard, maybe played with like a voice effect. And then the lyrics are very representative of the album in general. This is what you are going to hear. I am up late with an imaginary pain. Always did come in waves. And all that's constant, all that is constant is change. So let's listen to the music. Let's listen to the development of the song To Death's Heart. Oh, it's not Two Deaths. It's To Death's Heart. It doesn't matter. In 3 parts. Okay, so let's have a listen to this little bit here. I want you to listen to the way that the music comes in and gets layered in, and hear that nice quality to his voice, this strong vulnerability. I don't know. That's a guitar thing. So you hear like all these different layers in this guitar and like the chorus sound behind. There's even a female vocalist at times. And then underneath it gets echoed again, it gets doubled. Just grab the kids real quick. Can't start the car. Fading like a photograph. Tell that's in the dark. I actually enjoyed that even more listening to it this time. If you like that, I really suggest you give Bright Eyes a chance. I'll go kind of track by track for the rest of the album now. It starts off with something called Page Turner's Rag, which is, there's sort of a slightly experimental thing at the edges of this album, which I could do without. Sort of like these sound collages and talking in Spanish. I don't quite know why, and like a little ragtime song. The album really starts with the second track, Dance and Sing, which where we have this great kind of sneaky violin comes in and the shaky voice. There's like some banjo and pedal steel, and there's a chorus that isn't really a hook. The chorus isn't really a chorus, and this happens a fair amount here. It's like the singer has so much to say that they don't want to waste time repeating the same words over and over again. So the chorus is more like, and throughout the whole album, it seems to be, and you can tell me if you're a Bright Eyes fan, if this is a thing they often do, the chorus is just a second part of the song where one part of that other section of lyrics is consistent. So it's not like they'll say the same thing for all 4 lines, but maybe one of the 4 lines will be the same. Very crazy instrumental bridge on there. Like you heard on that other song, that's a thing that happens here. Lots of space for the instrumentation to go. Just Once in This World has a kind of funny thing here where they say drums and then the drums come in. Kind of Mickey Mouse on that. But it's another good example of the layering and the textures of this album. Mariana Trench, kind of aggressive, like computer-generated percussion on here. Kind of a cheesy, uplifting chorus. Do people think that Bright Eyes are cheesy? Is that what my ex-wife didn't like? Is that why I agreed with her? Is there something maybe too like nice and like clean about this? Like the lyrics in this, like see the top of the Mount Everest and the bottom of the Marianas Trench. I don't know. The way that he sings this, though, also reminded me of Robert Smith of The Cure. That similar kind of strength and vulnerability. Another very busy bridge with drums and horns, and really just lots of great horns all over here. One and Done is a good example of they just seem to give people space. And this is the bassist song. So the bass, listen to this track if you like hearing good bass playing. Not, boop, doop-a-doo, none of that. Just like very well done, well chosen, excellent bass. At this point of the album is where I really warmed up to his voice and started to get into it. This was before I made the Wilco realization upon first listening. But I really like the production on this because it's a little bit more echoey and more spacey. And it sounds almost, I think there's an actual bass solo on here. And a question that I had at the end here with the instrumental bits, is it overproduced? I don't know. I also wonder if you are a Bright Eyes fan, if you could tell me, is this representative of their sound? Is this more produced than their other stuff? Because this is a super produced album. Up until you get to Pan and Broom, the next track, which is great. It has a Casio drum beat. So kind of cool, enigmatic lyrics like, is that blood on your hands or chocolate and fruit? An interesting way of saying it. A much simpler production compared to the rest of the album. And in this way, I like it quite a bit. Like there's a solo on here, but it's like a keyboard solo, and it's basically just echoing the melody, and it's very simple. Stairwell Song. This band seems very romantic, and I don't mean like romance like, I love you, but like kind of cinematic, and they sort of like seem to be singing about life as though life were lived in a book. Kind of has that sort of feel. A very cinematic song, which made me realize, like, the bridge to this track is just very it's very uplifting and very cinematic. Made me realize that a lot of this album has that epic cinematic feel, probably because of all this, all this layering and all this instrumentation. Persona non grata starts off about getting ready to go on a date in a kilt. I used to wear a kilt. Dark times. It's actually kind of funny. It sort of this track reminds me of a lot of my daughter's taste in music when she was into kind of goth music. Like, this sounds like it could sort of be a My Chemical Romance track, and I know that's crazy. I know these are tigers and tigers and lions, right? They're not in the same ecosystem here, but there's something about the way it's sung, it feels that way. Then we get to the track Tilt-A-Whirl, which is just great. This was the track that made me realize the Wilco comparison most, but some great lyrics here, like, you can't unhear Beethoven's Fifth. I don't know exactly what that means, but I like it. And that's the kind of lyric which I really enjoy, because I might just end up saying that to other people. You can't unhear Beethoven's Fifth. And it's true. Like, if you ever see a great piece of music, if you ever hear a great piece of music or see a great piece of art, you can't undo that. Much like you can't undo trauma, you also can't undo something beautiful like that. A good example is Michelangelo's David. So you've seen pictures of it, but if you haven't seen it, like, you really haven't seen it, like, you can't possibly understand the harmony and beauty of it until you see it in person, to the point where I read an entire book while flying to Italy about Michelangelo's David. And I knew what I was going to see, and then I saw it, and it was like seeing the Grand Canyon. It just completely blew my mind. And I can't unsee that. So having a similar way with Beethoven's Fifth is an interesting concept about the nature of art and permanence, and it's quite nice. Hot Car in the Sun is very sad. I said this might be a lighter Wilco, but this is as sad as any song gets. I mean, talk about goth. It's like, I'm a dog who's hot in a car, I'm just gonna die. But it's really nice. And actually, I was doing this, but it's more of a piano lead. But talking about, interesting, the way this is written, there's a detail in the beginning of the song, which makes me like this album a lot more. He says, I'm chopping celery and making soup, thinking of my ex-wife's face. So this kind of great detail, sometimes when a musician or a lyricist puts great detail into a song, the more detail they get, the more universal it becomes. So I have never in my life chopped up celery and made soup while thinking of my ex-wife's face. But it is possible that at some point in my life, when I was in a rougher spot, right after my divorce. Is this guy recently divorced? It feels like he might be. This feels like it could be a, hey, I just got divorced album. And tell me in the comments if I'm right about that. But I could imagine that feeling, like going to that level of detail of chopping up celery and putting it in the soup and then thinking about that is the sort of universal feeling of missing somebody and that sense of loss. It's really quite great. I like this self-pity mode. I actually wish that there was more of this. I'm a dog dying in the Chevrolet and there's pedal steel. I like it. I actually think he should go further into this. Like further into the dark deepness. The next track, Forest Convalescence. You want to talk about a track that distances you from that emotion that you felt on the last song, you know, the self-pity, Forest Convalescence. I don't know what that means. This is cool because this is like, hey, drummer, whoever the drummer's name is, you get to play, you start playing. And so he starts playing, and that becomes the basis of the whole song, where in that other track, One and Done, is mostly the bassist. And it's really nice. And also, the bass player gets to come back, and the whole rhythm section really gets to have their whole song on here. But then it builds up again. It ends up being about turning 40, talks about what medications he takes before going to bed, and then like a whole gospel choir comes on, and there's a harpsichord, and it almost sounds kind of pseudo-Beatles-ish even at the end. The penultimate track on the album, Calais to Dover. At this point, the voice was getting to me a little bit too much. It reminded me, in not a good way, of Counting Crows. Another weird lions and tigers thing. But this was cool because there was a guitar solo. And it was a good guitar solo. It was a tasteful guitar solo. So like, is this a band where they have a guitar player who can do good guitar solos and they don't do it all the time? Is that... There's a fine line between restraint and stupidity. Because as far as guitar solos go, I listen to so much music every year, I don't hear very many good guitar solos. I just don't, right? I mean, the guitar solos are dead, And people who can do them usually do them too much. So maybe this is just right. But if you like guitar solos, listen to Calais de Dover. It's really quite good. It ends with a track called Comet Song. Piano, drums, guitar, builds up like everything else. It ends with a beautiful trumpet solo. The whole thing is on kind of a waltz. Everything just seemed, everything all over the place. Just everything on this album that's been happening the whole album, built, starting small and ending big, happens here. And it's very orchestral and very cinematic and very epic and very big. So there you go. If I had to, really think about it, I think I've missed out on the Bright Eyes, or Bright Eyes. Is there an article there? I don't know. Anyways, I think I missed out on their music. I understand why I dismissed them 12 years ago, 13, I don't know how long ago it was. But it seems that probably they're a great band. Anyways, Toby started barking. That's a good time as any to stop the video, because I got away with doing one take this time. This is good. I will show you my other dog, Bo, who's been sitting, because I told you that he was just sitting there. You want, look at this dog. Look at that. Could you possibly be happier than that dog is right now? That's why dogs don't have existential crises, Watch, if I say his name, he'll wag his tail. Bo. Bo. Oh, you want to say hi to the audience, Bobo? Aw. Okay. Anyways, I'm going to go give him a walk. And so for next time, for Bobo and Matt Reeves and Andy Serkis, there's the camera.